Hello, welcome to Webrecorder's community call for March. My name is Lorena Ramirez Lopez. I am the community manager for Webrecorder, and Webrecorder is a project that builds on open source tools that specializes in a user-driven form of web archiving, where the user is able to direct the archiving process through their browser. And we have a variety of open source tools, archive web page, replay web page, PyWB, Browser Tricks Crawler, and our new projects and open source tools is the Browser Tricks Cloud, which I'll let Ilya speak about now.
Hi everyone. Yes, So it was actually just last month, I think, that we announced that we're working on Browser Tricks Cloud, which is pretty exciting. I'll do a more extensive demo of it later in the call. And Browser Tricks Cloud basically is our interactive system for browser-based crawling that allows users to configure and create crawls through a user-friendly UI. It allows for collaborative archiving, including a real-time visibility. We're also working so you can actually see what's being crawled. We're also working on support for browser profiles to be able to log in, adding flexible storage options, and also signed and authenticatable web archives. This is all fairly ambitious. We thought that we wouldn't actually be able to have an initial version of it that's being used in production until later in June. But as it turned out, we've actually already using it in production for a couple of weeks. That is all kind of thanks to our collaboration with the Sucho Project. Sucho, which stands for Saving Ukrainian Cultural Heritage Online, was started just a couple of weeks ago by a group of volunteers. Currently, I think we have over 1,000 volunteers who are creating web archives in a decentralized way. And this has been really exciting to see. It all kind of came together organically, kind of stewarded by Sebastian and Quinn. I'll pass it on to Quinn in a little bit. But yeah, I'm just extremely excited and thrilled that this project came together for such an important kind of emergency situation due to the war in Ukraine. And so, yeah, the project has been essentially allowing volunteers to run crawls on their own using laptops, using cloud machines. And it's been kind of a really exciting effort to see come together over the past month, essentially. And basically the core idea is that all URLs that are submitted are sent both to Internet Archive and also crawled by volunteers into WAXI files. And what are some of the tools that are used for this? And it turns out that basically the Sucho Project has kind of been using almost all the Webrecorder tools that are out there. Browser Tricks Crawler is being used, as well as PyWB, which is part of Browser Tricks Crawler, Browser Tricks Cloud for automated crawling, as well as the archive web page extension is being used for manual capture of more complex sites that require an interactive approach. And that also includes a lot of kind of galleries and 3D model walkthroughs. And then, of course, the WAXI format is the core format that all of the data is being serialized to. And it's kind of exciting to see. And I would say even a little bit overwhelming to see all of these tools kind of used at once by a new group of volunteers. I'll just mention some of the highlights of Sucho from a technical perspective, and then there are, of course, many more. So there's been really excellent tutorials created for Browser Tricks Crawler and Browser Tricks Cloud by the community. And this is really exciting to see. Basically, these tutorials provide a wealth of information on how to use these tools kind of beyond our existing documentation. Thus far, with the WAXI format, there's now over 10 terabytes of WAXI files created. And we've talked about the WAXI format in many previous calls and how we're trying to standardize the format. Well, it's already being used in kind of a fairly extensive way now, because we have over 10 terabytes of WAXI data. And just last week, we actually, I think, set a record for the largest WAXI file created, which was over 1 terabyte. Initially, when the WAXI format was introduced, I was hoping that it could scale up to 100 gigabytes. And so it was kind of, in a way, exciting, but also a little bit scary to see that we actually have a WAXI file that reaches 1 terabyte. We're also looking at ways to kind of support multiple WAXI files being used together, and dealing with files of that size can be challenging, of course, but it's good to know that it is possible, and that file does actually replay in a replay web page, and I'll share a link to it. Thanks, Ed, for sharing that. Yeah, so that's basically in the chat. That's the link to the 1 terabyte Waxy file. We also have Browsertrix crawler running on all sorts of different environments. I think folks have been running it on their own laptops, on Linux, Mac, and Windows. And I haven't actually tested Browsertrix crawler on Windows before, so it's great to know that it does work. There's been cloud machines that's been running on, and even a Raspberry Pi. So I haven't actually tried this, but I saw that someone had Browsertrix crawler running on a Raspberry Pi, and there was a tutorial for it out there. There's also a set of community created crawler rules for Browsertrix crawler that kind of include common things like exclusions for ads and other configurations. So the Sucho community has been building kind of a additional reference for how to use Browsertrix crawler for different sites. And that's been really helpful in order to be able to kind of figuring out what rules should be standardized, figuring out kind of what are some of the pitfalls of running crawls, as we've had many folks that are very new to web archiving, just kind of figuring out how to configure and run crawls, and also what some pitfalls may be, such as crawler traps, or we, for example, had a calendar crawl that crawled a calendar through several centuries forward and backward, and so I need to figure out ways to make that easier to detect. And finally, also really exciting is that we have the Browsertrix Cloud now also essentially used in production, even though we've just announced it last month, and it was not. Again, I thought that we wouldn't, but here we are due to kind of an emergency in production. And I'll do a quick demo of it later. And I think next I wanted to pass things to Quinn, who can talk more about the Sucho workflow and other aspects of Sucho.
Yeah, thanks, Ilya. So this is we realized that even though it took us a number of hours to try to put our workflow together in a visible format like this, we realized as soon as we were done that we were missing multiple things. We're missing a whole separate Wikidata track where people have been initially we pulled data from Wikidata, realized that a lot of it was stale. Sites have been taken over by casinos or were serving malware, and now trying to get better data back up to Wikidata. So that's a whole thread of work that's not even on here. This also doesn't include our situation monitoring work, where we have people who are monitoring air raid alerts and trying to get a sense of how things are actually like on the ground at any given moment, and using that information to help us reprioritize things. So with apologies for missing those whole areas of work, this is a high level view of how things go these days. We also have a more complicated, link pre-processing process now. I mean, this really is a project that changes day by day. Basically, though, people submit URLs to us, either individually or sometimes people have large lists of links that we're able to take sort of en masse, so we don't have to torture them with filling out a Google form 300 times. No one wants to do that. Then from there, there's a sort of deduplication process, checking the IP address. Originally, we were mostly concerned with things that were hosted physically in Ukraine, thinking of, server destruction and internet connectivity as being major issues. At this point, though, we've expanded the scope to basically anything with a .ua name, not least because, a month into the war, people might start having trouble paying their server bills, and hopefully, that the servers will show some mercy. We can't guarantee that. So we're just trying to get everything that might go down through one means or another, regardless of where it's hosted. And then from there, everything goes through two workflows. We do send things off to the Wayback Machine. We have people who go and check to make sure it's in there. And there have been cases where things like the front page is in the Wayback Machine, but it didn't go as deep as it needed to. And so we've had people submitting links often for deeper in the internals of the pages to make sure that all of the content is there. Sometimes there are platforms that just capture really poorly both with the Wayback Machine and Browsertrix, in which case we have a group of scrapers who have written some custom code for different platforms. DSpace has actually been a major offender in this with these platform issues. DSpace has been very challenging to crawl, and we've had people write code to deal with DSpace sites. There's also a Eastern European library system that no one was really familiar with, among the Western librarians here. And we've had people write custom code for getting those pages as well. Sometimes people, download PDFs in mass and images in mass, and we upload those files to the Sucho collection on the Internet Archive. But I mean, really, we've been emphasizing that Browsertrix is absolutely like the cornerstone tool of our workflow. We are sending things to the Wayback Machine, but our primary focus in a lot of the activity is around getting people to run Browsertrix originally on their own laptops. We got a lot of people installing Docker for the first time this month. We managed to hold their hand through that process, and it was not nearly as bad as many people, myself included, feared. And we just had tons of personal laptops, spare laptops, people with 4 laptops on their desk, sharing pictures, 4 laptops and a dog, often just running things on their own machines. So it really has been like a scaling up of technical capabilities for people. But the Browsertrix Cloud has really exploded the kinds of people we've been able to bring into the hands-on archiving work. Be it people with like somewhat unstable internet connections, older laptops, not quite as technically comfortable, or also for that matter, children. So this is exciting. One of our volunteers, Chris Milson, mentioned that he had sat down with his 6-year-old and they had archived a site together using Browsertrix Cloud. And she even drew a picture of the experience that was extremely heartwarming. And we may have just put in the world's most adorable grant appendix as a result of that. But this got me thinking, like, I have a 6-year-old too. I have an 8-year-old. They go to an elementary school, a community of people that are really interested and invested in trying to help. And so literally last night we had a web archiving for everyone, including kids event at Malcolm X Elementary in Berkeley, California. And we had a handful of families. They all created accounts on Browsertrix Cloud. We walked through the process of archiving a site. And my 8-year-old realized that he didn't want to go to bed until he archived like just a couple more Ukrainian sites. And he managed to sell me on the idea that like maybe every day after school now he can go into the spreadsheet and go save some more sites. It's really exciting to have these tools that are accessible and empower people of all ages, from young children to retirees.
So for all of us that wants to learn how to use Browsertrix Crawler, Ilya, with our demos.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I'm still kind of shocked that, considering that again, this was, I was thinking that at best we'll get something usable by June that people can start using in a production capacity, and due to circumstances, and also thanks to our excellent front end developer Sua, we've been able to have a sort of minimally working browser cloud system over the past several weeks, and accessible to all, I guess, even children. So it's been really exciting. So this is kind of our browser cloud landing page, which just launched last month, and you can still sign up for early access when we have it more publicly available. But we do actually have it already running for Sucho, and just wanted to show, and this is also brand new. We have this is sort of the admin interface. This was in fact added just yesterday, which shows all of the currently running crawls. You can actually see kind of who started the crawls as well, and these are kind of various volunteers from the Sucho Slack. And we can kind of see crawls that have been running for a while. There's actually a limit now of just to keep our sanity and limits under control of 500,000 pages. And so you can see that some of these crawls may max out at that. And we'll need to figure out if it was kind of a really large site or some sort of crawler trap. And then when we click on one of these crawls, we could actually, so this is a new one, we could also watch the crawl as it happens. And this is kind of a really exciting part. So this crawl, I think, looks like it's going through a bunch of PDFs. Let's see, I think I had another one here. So this crawl is going through a looks like a catalog of some sort. Yeah, and it's in some ways kind of exciting to be able to see this, and also kind of be able to see what the challenges are. So, for example, if you can identify if the browser is taking a really long time on a particular page, this will at least show that. So, like, and again, kind of one of the hardest parts of browser-based crawling, I would say, is kind of determining when a page is actually done, because there could be more things loading on a page. There could be ads, there could be additional content, that this kind of helps us see what the browser is actually doing as it's crawling. Yeah, so it's kind of a, let's see what else. Oh, here's another one that I had running. So this one's going pretty quickly. Yeah, I could just kind of I think it looks like it's yeah, essentially going through another site. And yeah, so this is actually right now, this is only available to me. This is a kind of a super admin view that shows all of the running crawls. Everyone who's signed up to Webrecorder Cloud also has their own account and can see the crawls that they're running as well. And yeah, so this is kind of essentially going from sort of an initial prototype to kind of full production use within a matter of weeks is exciting, but also a little bit scary. I think we just got an updated number that we're actually closer to 20 terabytes of data from Sebastian. So before this is over, I'm not entirely sure how much archive data there will be. And of course, there's also a QA process involved in checking the archives. And yeah, so this is showing the running crawls. I also wanted to briefly show, so once a crawl is finished, it is added to, or it's possible, it's automatically uploaded to our S3 bucket, and it's possible to download the crawl or the WAXI file. So everything's stored in WAXI files, and it's also possible to preview the crawl in replay web page. And this is kind of the a standard replay web page embed, where you could essentially view the WAXI file right away, and kind of have a really quick turnaround on running a crawl and seeing the results of it without having to wait for many hours or days, even in some other services, that before you could actually view the results of the crawl. Yeah, so this process will hopefully be improved as well. Right now, we don't yet have logs, but that's kind of on our to-do list, is to support showing the crawl logs in this as well. Yeah, so I think that's yeah, kind of a brief overview. And I think at this point, I was trying to get exactly how many crawls we've run already, but I'm fairly certain it's probably several thousand that have been run through Webrecorder Cloud, separate from others who've been running Webrecorder crawler on the command line as well. And yeah, so maybe at this point, we'll pause and maybe we'll leave some time for questions about all of this, about Sucho. And again, thank you for Quinn, and also to Sebastian, who's been the kind of behind the scenes admin, and really kind of deserves a lot of credit for getting Webrecorder Crawler up and running and helping folks get started with it initially, and kind of to both of them for spearheading this effort.
Yeah, We have one question from earlier about the workflow where is the Internet Archive ingesting and replaying the Waxy files as well?
Nope. They want web archives through the Wayback Machine channel.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So that's that. I think that's where things are. It's certainly possible. The Waxy files are the Waxy files contain work files, which they could ingest. But yeah, I think that's something that we're looking at. Yeah, it certainly would be interesting to see if that a compatibility could exist.
And I really like this analogy, how this kind of looks like a telescope. Definitely. One of the questions is in the live view, is each thumbnail a separate worker? And if they all are identical, is that a possible red flag?
I don't know that it enforces order. I think sometimes they might flip. Still, again, this is still fair, but each of them is a distinct page that's being loaded. Which and the way that it works is that currently it's so browser crawler Docker image can support multiple workers, and so right now one row is one browser crawler with 6 workers. And it's actually possible to dynamically scale a crawl to run multiple browser crawler instances, and then currently that will add additional rows. These are all kind of knobs that we're experimenting with to see what the best results are in terms of how many workers to have and how many instances of browser crawler to have. And this is kind of, yeah, so there's a few different ways to configure it, but yeah.
And one more question about Browsertrix crawler before we move on. Are there any limitations in file size to the Browsertrix cloud?
That's a good question. Ideally, no. So the way it's configured, it's running on AWS, and it can essentially have unlimited storage size. Currently, everything is being written to a single Waxy file, and that's kind of how we ended up with a Waxy file that's 1 terabyte in size, which of course isn't necessarily ideal. The longer term plan is to actually have a maximum size limit where after it gets to a certain size, create a new file, and then have replay web page be able to replay a list of Waxy files simultaneously. And that's currently in development. But for now, I think, yeah, we're basically sticking with kind of a single file output until the multi-file Waxy system is ready. But we've seen that Waxy files can scale to 1 terabyte. And also the general approach has been to be able to essentially create 1 Waxy file per site, which makes it in a lot of ways portable. So that, for example, if a particular crawl didn't work or there's some issues, you could rerun just that crawl. And the fact that that's generally been our kind of operation here is that each crawl is 1 seed that is crawled individually, and so yeah, we can kind of see the the seed URL here, and so that also kind of limits the total size that's created during a single crawl because we're just focusing on one seed at a time. So yeah, hopefully that provides kind of a detailed answer to that. Are there any more questions? If there aren't any more questions, yeah, we can move on to talking about Waxy, and then we can.
I feel that more questions will arise as people digest. Like one just popped up.
Okay, and I'll stop my screen sharing.
Is that possible to do incremental archive upon a specific site, say writing into the same Waxy?
It would be possible. So currently basically the Waxy file just contains work files that are zip together with CDX. So it would be possible to, for example, uncompress a Waxy file or unzip it rather, and then create a new one to add additional and kind of merge two Waxy files together. We don't quite yet have the tools for that, but it's something that would be doable. So that's one approach. Another is to just kind of have distinct Waxy files for each crawl, and then have them be combined through a kind of a manifest file.
All right. And please feel free if you have more questions as, all this info digest either about Waxy, Browser Tricks Crawler, even Sucho. And just in case folks aren't familiar with Waxy, Waxy is an acronym used for Web Archive Collection Zipped. And we are currently doing a user research study that I'm going to pass over the mic to Cade.
Hello. So thank you, everybody. I won't take too much time because I'm sure we'd like to talk more about questions of the demos that we've seen so far. But we, as it's just been mentioned, are doing a large study on archive tools themselves. And we've had a pretty great response so far from the community, from institutions in particular, different groups of people who have given up between an hour and 15 minutes to come and speak with us and go quite in depth. The work that we've really done, and if you were on the previous community call from last month, you would have seen some of our very early findings. The work that we're doing is not just about user research or design recommendations, but also a little bit deeper than that, because the New Design Congress, for those who aren't familiar, is a research organization that sees all forms of digital infrastructure as expressions of power, whether that's whatever that context that is, whether it's in a good context or in a negative context. And so what we've done in the last month and a half is we've spoken to a wide range of people to understand both the practice of archiving from different places in the archival practice, both everything from individual archivists working by themselves as either investigators or hobbyists, through to, I was about to drop a link in. There's also a call for participation that we've had up here. So if you are interested in seeing this research, and please a retweet and some boost would be appreciated with this. The thing I wanted to mention here with this work is that it's not just looking at smaller independent researchers, it's also looking at institutions and the people who exist within the structures and the custodian flow of information that occurs when creating and maintaining large sets of archives. So we're mapping not just the technology, but also the sort of social graphs of how, or the institutional graphs of how information and archives material moves through different organizations and between organizations as well. And I think the work is pretty interesting. We've got a number of, as I said, findings that we'll expand upon in a public report, as well as a set of design recommendations specifically for Webrecorder and for the Waxy format. But also, I think the point I really wanted to highlight today is that we are a little bit overrepresented right now in the institutional participation. And so we're looking to diversify a little bit beyond the immediate sort of large scale institutions, although anybody who is interested in this work who is from an institution and hasn't spoken to us yet, please do. If you're interested and you have a little bit of time before mid-April. But in the meantime as well, if you're aware of a group or an individual or a civil society or a newspaper or other non-institutional examples of people doing web-based archiving, then please put this call out in front of them so that we can balance it a little bit more, because that would make this research even better and even more well-informed than I hope it already is. And thank you. That's all I've got for today. Open for questions though as well. I mean, I know I just sort of ran through this and there's not a lot here, but I'm keen to hear, especially if you take a look at the tweet, any questions on the work that we're doing.
Yeah, please feel free to reach out for any questions. If you don't use web archives as much and don't think you might be, qualified, or your experience might not be useful, just reach out to us and we'll talk about it. Does that sound good, Cade?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I'm just seeing a couple of retweets. So thank you so much to those who
Yes.
just clicked that link and are starting to boost. Really appreciate it. It's this little bit of boosting that we've done with this last round of call outs has actually gotten quite a few additional signups. We've got quite a few interviews coming up. We could always use more before the research closes. But yeah, thank you for the boost so far. I've seen a couple come through.
And speaking about helping and working with us, plug for Webrecorder.
Yes. Yes. So also wanted to mention that we are now hiring, in particular hiring for two positions. One is a community support engineer, and it'll be a part-time contract position and potentially full-time later. And the immediate focus will be on supporting the Sucho community and perhaps other community-based initiatives in the future. And this role will involve kind of understanding sort of needs of the community, figuring out kind of what's going wrong, what's working well, and helping test various crawling setups and report issues on GitHub, and then kind of circle back with the community, which is currently on Slack. And if you know anyone who might be interested, please send them our way. And this is I think maybe a great opportunity for someone who is new to web archiving and new to development and wants to kind of learn how these processes work. And then we're also looking for backend engineers to help work on all of these tools. Right now, maintenance and development of all these tools mostly falls on me, and that's not entirely sustainable. So I definitely need some help. And the backend engineer will be working on all of the tools, but focusing mostly on Browser's crawler and Browser's Cloud, and perhaps Archive web page and replay web page, and kind of essentially the entire ecosystem, but focusing primarily on the crawling tools initially, probably tools relating to the Waxy format. So again, if you have any leads or know anyone who might be interested, please feel free to share this link with them. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them as well. And we can leave the remaining time for questions.
Yeah. And don't worry, it doesn't have to be the last question about Browsertrix Cloud, but will the Browsertrix Cloud support dual storage, for example, Web3 storage?
Yes. So I mean that's definitely the goal of Browsertrix Cloud is to support kind of as many storage options as possible. Currently we're using S3 and S3 compatible interfaces, but the idea is to also be able to support IPFS, for example. And in fact, we're already exploring that as options. So yes, the answer is yes, is to be able to support many options and to allow whoever's deploying it to choose which storage they would like to use.
If I just might chime in there, because I'm managing all these 20 terabytes we've arrived now, and it's becoming a headache. So I think like Web3 storage and then distributed, either public Web3 storage, but also Web3 storage that can be maybe decentralized storage that can be part of a private network of institutions is really something necessary to handle these kind of file sizes, because I'm trying to figure this out. And it becomes a challenge. That's all I can say. So I think it's really important and a very good question.
Yeah, another reason why the Sucho project is so exciting is that it may be the first instance where there's sort of a entirely community crowdsourced archive that doesn't belong to any one institution and shouldn't belong to any one institution, but is something that can be accessed in a decentralized way and shared and replicated, because it's sort of essentially the online cultural heritage of the entire country. And so it shouldn't belong to just one institution. It should be something that's accessible to all. But given the size, there are definitely challenges of how to replicate and store this data in the most accessible way without relying on, for example, any single institution or any single storage provider, where I think some of these decentralized technologies, storage options like IPFS and Filecoin and so forth, can be really useful.
Can you clarify that? I just have one question. So Sebastian and Ilya, you're hosting all of the content that's generated from Sucho on like your own cloud? How's this working?
So should I say something about that, Ilya?
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead. You know more about it than I do.
Because Amazon Web Services stepped up and provided us with a bunch of free credits we run Browser Cloud on this scale, first of all, because it's an emergency response. We need parallel crawls as much as possible. And then also S3 cloud storage. But what then has become the problem, even with free credits, is actually traffic costs. Because with commercial cloud providers, they have egress charges. So they charge, for example, Amazon 9 cents per gigabyte. So even that is a problem. Then it's kind of stuck, in one storage provider, and they all have similar costs around this. Sometimes it's 5 times cheaper or 5 times more expensive. And the problem is that you need these kind of cloud storage providers, S3 compatible or anything else, because we don't know what the limit will be with this kind of action. So this is why we have one mirror currently with an academic institution in Europe, but we're paying dearly for it, and it's really not ideal because institutions usually can say, okay, we have let's say 10 terabytes of space or 20 terabytes of space that we can give you, but we will hit that limit, potentially at some point. So this is why distributed storage as a long-term solution is really important.
Right. That's interesting. Yeah, I was kind of thinking that the default would have been that everyone who's working on the project was kind of doing their own storage, but I kind of see how that wouldn't be sustainable for the project.
Well, also we have the idea to be able to play out the WAX files immediately, because people need to do quality control on it if it failed, and that actually only works with cloud storage again, because even with Ilya's amazing technology that the files, a 1 terabyte file can load on demand, and it basically only loads the front page, that is still mind-boggling to me how that works, but it does. Then because these files are so big that you need what's called a content delivery network to have the files close to the end user. Otherwise, these huge files will not play out. They will be slow to load. So you need this international server infrastructure, to play out these files so we can quality control them, and also that the public can see, what is saved. That could be Ukrainian, institutions who these websites belong to, for example. So that's a really complicated thing. Like people have saved it on their own machines, just for safekeeping as well, if they can. But they also run out of storage. They deinstall games and they do everything they can, to have enough storage. But we want to, gather them, back them up again, and just the aggregator of these archives, let's say. And
Thank you for clarifying.
We can continue this conversation as well on our forum. That way others, when they have that inquiry, will be able to hear some responses. Quinn, if you want to speak more about how folks can help Sucho, or what else might be needed, what is the call for help right now?
At this point, honestly, I think we may be more or less at capacity with the amount of tasks we have and the amount of people helping. Our Slack currently has over 1,300 people in it, if you can believe it. And I mean, time is our biggest challenge, both the time of, dealing with the pace of the war and, not knowing sort of where places might come on and offline. But also, orienting new people and getting them hooked up with useful tasks, also takes time. If you're interested in helping down the road, as we're able to expand our capacity, we have a volunteer sign up form on our website at sucho.org, where we sort of have a standby list. Over time, our needs are going to change. We're going to have to be thinking about curation of these archives. We're going to have to be thinking about some of the things that Ilya mentioned in terms of being able to glue together different manual web recorder crawl of a 3D model with a browser tricks crawl of the overall site and things like that. So there's definitely going to be more work to be done, even though our goal is not to become institutionalized as an organization. Like people have asked, you're going to form a nonprofit? No, if we form a nonprofit, we will have failed. We need to get this material back to, you know, the people who care about it and take care of it. We're in it for as long as we need to be, but no longer.
Yeah, thank you for thank you, Quinn and Sebastian from Sucho for coming by. And I think we had one more question that came up, right? Just checking. Okay, yeah, so a question about, yeah, so we have the YAML examples from Browsertrix that have been put together. So the Browsertrix Cloud JSON is actually, and it's basically the same thing. It's just, for some reason we started using JSON instead of YAML, but it's basically the same. It supports the same options because it's just the Browsertrix crawler config, but just in JSON format. So we'll update it to support YAML was one thing that we're doing, and then also we might have other examples that are specific to the cloud, but in general the same examples should work. Just you have to convert them to JSON until we support YAML. But it's basically this all the same options such as exclusions and so forth will also work in the cloud system.
We are almost at time. So like I mentioned, if you want to continue asking questions or discussing, we do these calls monthly. We have a forum. Feel free to reach out to us at info@webrecorder.org. And we really appreciate your time and efforts with this participation. So I think on that note, we'll leave on a really nice comment, which it's really amazing to see all these modern and viable tools, which seem like supercharged in a sudden. Great job, guys. We just submitted a request for an early access to BT Cloud and look forward to trying it soon. Yes, so.
Yes, we'll let you know.
Maybe there I have a last word. Oh, sorry. No, go for it.
Sure. Go ahead, Sebastian.
No, because if you say that, you know, like you would like to have early access to the Browsertrix Cloud, don't forget, you know, to spread the word about Browsertrix and, you know, like send all the grant opportunities, anything you have. Like this project would never have been, you know, possible without Browsertrix. And we are trying to beat the drum for it. And, you know, so if you think you can have a use for it, you know, please try to support it in any way you can. I want to make that last point.
Thank you, Sebastian. Really appreciate it. Yeah. So we're trying to develop this as fast as we can, and the more funding we have, the more people we can hire, and the faster we can build these tools, and the better we can make them. So it's all tied together. But yeah, and yeah, really appreciate this, your support and everyone's support in helping these tools get additional use, and really great to have them used so extensively with the Sucho project.